What's the most American thing you've done? Story 1. Went to Walmart at 2 a.m. in my pajamas to buy ingredients for s'mores, then made them using a cigarette lighter in the parking lot because I had a craving. The security guard just watched and shook his head. Story 2. When I was 18, I used the Bush administration's $250 stimulus check to buy a shotgun. Bonus: my ID was not checked when I bought shotgun shells at Walmart. I went back later that day and had my ID checked when I bought spray paint. Story 3. I went to camp with our church kids group, and the camp they rented had a rifle range where they'd teach you how to shoot, so I'd have to say learning how to use a gun at church camp. Answer: that is the most American thing I've ever heard. We once stayed at my uncle's beach house in Florida, and I saw a neighbor get out of his pickup truck, and he brought in a big gun to the house. I woke my husband up, he's from Texas, and I told him that there's going to be a shooting across the street. I was panicked for the family. He calmly said the guy probably came back from hunting, and sure enough, later that morning, the whole family came out in what looked like church clothes. Story 4. Search for a manufacturer's coupon to bring the price of a prescribed inhaler down from $238 to $35 all with insurance. Story 5. Pay a shootload of money per month for health insurance, only to be denied coverage when I have health issues. Story 6. Blew up a tree with tannerite, shot with my great-grandpa's 30-30. Tree launched 20 feet in the air, came back down and speared the roof of my old broken-down Jeep Grand Cherokee. In that moment, I felt the most American ever. Story 7. Risking a car accident driving myself to the hospital when I can't afford to think about calling an ambulance. Answer: unfun fact about this. I work for a professional fire dep in the SEUS. We used to only charge roughly $300, I think 'twas before my time, for ambulance rides to the hospital. But then, Medicaid or Medicare? Something like that raised what they would partially cover for a ride, and now we charge that price rotely $1,600? Just because we can, since it's guaranteed money, so what they say. Story 8. Watched a guy who looked like white Jesus and dressed like the Statue of Liberty spinning a tax relief arrow sign around while freak dancing with a telephone pole. Story 9. Cross the state border to buy fireworks that are illegal in my state so I can drive back to my house and set them off anyways. Learn from my parents, edit, and never get in trouble for it. Story 10. Calling my roommate to take me to the ER after a dog bit me on the face because I was uninsured. That was pretty American. But seriously, American things other people did that day? Complete strangers making sure I was okay and staying with me till I got help. EMTs putting my face back together and telling me to call a friend so I don't get hit with a big bill. The ER doctor calling a specialist to fix me up so I wouldn't have a big scar. A world-renowned plastic surgeon spending over an hour and 120 stitches to put my lips back on my face to where it is barely noticeable, and then waive all his fees because I was just a good guy trying to help a dog. Story 11. Tipped all of my servers bartenders $20-30 on my honeymoon in Greece. Was confused at first why they were all so appreciative and grateful, until I remembered that they were actually paid a living wage, so a tip of that size wasn't necessary for their survival lol. Story 12. I lived in the USA for a few years, am Latin American, and maybe the most American thing I did while I was there was to hire Mexicans to help me move furniture, and get ripped off by them jaja. Story 13. Found out I'm a 17th generation New Englander. My family helped settle Brooklyn, New York, and am a direct ancestor of the first white woman born in modern-day New York and the first Muslim to live in New York. Answer: my dad always loved telling a story about how, When he grew up in Boston, one of his friends would always brag about how his family was one of the first settlers of Boston, and he had all these Boston Brahmin ancestors. So one day, the kid is going off on this again while they're walking back from school, and they get to the kid's place, and my dad just points to the kid's two-family duplex and goes, "And this, all you guys have to show for it?" Story 14. Drove my pickup into the woods with a 500-round box of some .223 and 10 pounds of tannerite, blasted some Sky Nerd while drinking some Shoot Domestic, and let freedom ring all afternoon. America. Story 15. 4th of July a few years back, wore an 18th century dress, fired a musket at, and bayoneted a straw doll wearing a red coat. Story 16. Worked paycheck to paycheck my entire adult life while accruing no savings and never taking a real vacation. Story 17. I was in the Navy for 8 years back in ancient history. I got out in 1987. I'm old. I spent most of those years in Orlando FL, so I don't have any war stories. It was actually kind of fun. Even so, it was undoubtedly the most American thing I've ever done. Story 18. Worked 30 days in a row at a minimum wage job without a day off, but still less than 40 hours each week, so I didn't qualify for health benefits or overtime. Story 19. One 4th of July in the middle of SC, I shot various firearms on our property, went mudding in the backyard, and then had a good old Southern cookout. Yeehaw! Story 20. I've shot a fully automatic rifle, several actually, without being in the military. Made brisket, ribs, and pulled pork for dinner on the 4th of July, and then watched fireworks in the evening. One time on a business trip to Arizona, I got a free upgrade to a Ford Mustang. I drove it out into the desert on a lonely 2-lane road, blasting Guns N' Roses. Found some nice straight roads that went off into the distance with pretty red rock formations behind. I parked the car across both lanes and got a picture of an iconic American muscle car in an iconic American landscape. Never saw another car. Story 21. I've stood on the corner in Winslow, Arizona. Such a fine sight to see. The flatbed Ford didn't need to slow down. It's parked there permanently now. Story 22. I think the most American thing I did was go to a foreign country and insult the locals for their lack of culture. In my own defense, it was extended family, and they dared me to play the rude Mercan the role for them. I would never do that in public because I'm not Karen Kin. Story 23. I use the word awesome about 67 times a day, sometimes sincerely, sometimes sarcastically. Always awesome. Story 24. Arguing with my insurance company about them not covering a test for my 2-year-old that was having trouble breathing and had to go to the ER. The viral swab is not covered because they said it wasn't necessary. Story 25. I drink root beer. If there is anyone you suspect of being a spy, give them root beer, and if they say it tastes like cough syrup, that's proof enough. Story 26. Had just picked up a battle rifle, and on the drive home saw a bald eagle standing on the road on State Road 69. Story 27. Voted for equality, freedom, education, and progress, and watched it dissolve away in a sea of mass stupidity, corruption, and prejudice. Story 28. Ramped my truck off a low water bridge while firing a pistol in the air. I was young and very stupid. Story 29. Rode in a helicopter while shooting a mounted machine gun out at a herd of feral hogs. Article about these guys, for those interested. Story 30. Resisted the urge to flip my coworkers off as they argued over the best time of year to get a good deal on a gun at Walmart. Story 31. It's possible I have cervical cancer, but I'm not being tested for it because the last time I got 3 different bills in the mail totaling around $1,500. Even if I do have cancer, I couldn't afford the treatment anyways, so why waste the money testing for it? America. Story 32. Faked a little cold and sickness to skip work for a week to go surf and deer hunt. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, damn it! Story 33. Shooting tannerite with a Ruger rifle rested on my Jeep and taking bites of a ribeye in between shots. Story 34. Climbed out the driver's window of a truck, walked across the hood, then climbed back in the passenger window. At the same time, my buddy switched seats and continued driving. We were not smart teenagers. Story 35. In British, but I've watched that many American movies and shows that I say diaper instead of nappy. I dislike myself. Story 36. Showed up at Gatwick Airport on the 4th of July wearing a t-shirt that said, "England blew a 13-colony lead." Also took a pic with the Tower Bridge in the background wearing said shirt. That and just living. Story 37. Serve my country with pride, then return just to be shoot on and misunderstood for what I experienced then and experience now. We're all fudge up. Some of us just admit it and seek help for it. Get help, people. It's okay to not be okay, but white-knuckling life brings everyone around you down to humanity. God bless America. Story 38. It was a whole day. In that day, I went off-roading in a 2-wheel drive, 90s Chevy 1500. We got stuck and had to spend an hour digging it out of mud with sticks because we didn't have anything besides guns. We shot trees to break off branches. Later in the day, I got a text from some guy that was stalking me. It is a whole story of its own, but he didn't realize that I had been to his house before a couple years before he started stalking me. He sent me a text with both of my sister's names, including my 10-year-old sister's name in school she went to. I pulled up the old email with his address and me. And my friend went there and parked outside. We were in a muddy truck, and before we got there, we put all of our guns in the back. I took a picture of his house with the gun clearly visible in the bed of the truck and sent it to him after we drove away. He then called the cops on me. The friend I was with had a great family connection. His dad was chief of police. We told him about the stalking in the picture. He called up fudge idiots. We told him this while eating brisket that I had started that morning before leaving. All of this also happened on July 4th. We were also lighting and watching fireworks. In the end, we didn't get in trouble for the threatening picture, and the stalker was arrested for stalking, and he had a few illegal guns. I didn't feel like pressing charges, but he still got in trouble for the guns. So in a day, me and my dumb friend overestimated a truck's abilities, got covered in mud getting it out with branches, we shot off trees, we sort of threatened a stalker, we used our police connections to not get in trouble, and we ate great BBQ while being called names by a cop while watching and lighting fireworks. It's my most American day by far. Story 39. Paid over $2,000 for a necessary medical procedure, root canal. Dentistry isn't covered by OHIP. There's a federal plan that recently started and I applied to, but I couldn't wait to hear back to deal with the shooting pain that was keeping me from sleeping or eating. So there goes the progress I've made on my savings. Story 40. 1976. It was July 4th and America's 200-year anniversary. Fireworks were on the Charles River, and Boston Pops played the overture. Was a great celebration. Story 41. I was a kid and we would go to a local lake in the summer, drink grape and orange soda, swim without lifeguards, and eat PBJ sandwiches and chicken and a biscuit crackers with spray cheese, get horribly sunburned, then go home and ride our bikes around the neighborhood without helmets until the streetlights came on, still in our swimsuits and mangled hair, wearing off-brand Keds if we were lucky, but mostly flip-flops or bare feet. Story 42. Fought for my country with the U.S. military. Following that, I supported national defense with a variety of classified aerospace and space systems jobs for the next 35 years. I took an oath to protect this country, and I still live by it. Story 43. Whenever I, a Canadian, am in the U.S., I have it dialed into my brain to say restroom instead of washroom bathroom. It sounds weird to me to say it, but I do. I always feel like a secret imposter and wonder if the locals know I'm not American. Story 44. Obligatory not me, but my North Dakota farming family. Besides the typical overabundance of fireworks and beer on the 4th, they got out the rifle and some kind of explosive they dumped in a field way across from the house. They then got out the scope, made sure no cars were coming down the road, and shot it for an extra big boom on the 4th of July. That shoot was loud. Same family insisted on teaching my husband to shoot a gun when they found out he had never even held one. For me personally, I've driven a combine, probably the most expensive thing I'll ever drive in my life. Story 45. On the day I got my U.S. citizenship, I went out to shoot a bunch of guns, then drank a case of beer when I got home. Couldn't think of anything more American to do in that scenario. Story 46. When I was 24, I rented a car with a friend of mine and took a cross-country road trip. 2 weeks to just drive and poke around a couple of cities and stay in Fleabag motels. Story 47. Not getting dental care because I can't afford it and Medicaid doesn't cover it. Thinking about trying heroin as a painkiller, but don't want to risk getting a fatal dose of fentanyl in the process. I loathe being intoxicated. Story 48. Watched a fat man hold his beer, a hot dog and a rib in his hands while listening to Beer for My Horses by Toby Keith at Lake. Story 49. Went on a Walmart run with my best friends from high school when we were all 16 working at a pizza place at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. We almost got kicked out for sword fighting with pool noodles and went to McDonald's a quarter mile down the road to get food and ate on the tailgate of an F-150 back in the Walmart parking lot. Pre-COVID Iowa. Story 50. Joined the Army, just like every man in my family has done. Then bought a ranch and am turning it into a farm operation, planting and raising hops for beer. Story 51. I shouted USA, USA at the top of my lungs with one fist in the air as I raced downhill on my bike at the Grand Canyon, with tourists on buses cheering me along the way, with some even joining in. That was pretty Marisa of me. Story 52. We accidentally started a small forest fire when my friend lit a firework motor while camping. 11 of us using cups, buckets, and whatever we could find to carry water from the stream. Got it put out, luckily. Story 53. Joined the military so I could afford a college education. Was unable to get a job in my field. Now, I drive a trash truck. Story 54. One time, I spent 30 minutes cramped in a dark closet off my high school library because there was an active shooter in the building. Story 55. Me and 2 of my buddies were in Greece for a port call, and we went out and got just partied too hard. On our way back, there was a big graffiti sign on the side of the building that said, "Passing to Americans," so we did what any responsible sailors would do. We flagged down a cop and had him take a picture of us in front of the sign. Story 56. I got fired from a job once after I was mugged. Bonus points, they used a gun, and the police came to talk to me about it while I was on shift. Owner didn't like that I had made the restaurant look bad by talking to the cops out back. Gone the next day before I clocked in. Story 57. I sent boxes of sheep wool to the Gulf, underwater oil spill to attract and capture globs of crude oil. Story 58. Regularly get my Chinese food from a restaurant that has literally nothing but Mexicans in the kitchen. Fudge love this country. Story 59. When I was 4 years old, I was a guest at my aunt's wedding, and there was, I swear I'm remembering this correctly, but it seems insane, a ranch dressing fountain. My cousin and I drank ranch dressing directly from it. Yes, gross on many levels, but it's gotta be the most American thing ever. Story 60. Most American thing I've done is read replies on Reddit for way too long while neglecting aspects of my life that desperately need tending to. Story 61. About a month ago, I went out for beer and bison burgers with a friend in his pickup truck after our trip to the gun range. Story 62. Complained about the government, shot a gun, overpaid for health care, talked about U.S. superiority without ever visiting a foreign country to form an actual basis of comparison outside of stereotypes and misinformation. Story 63. This just happened recently, and I even remember thinking to myself how ridiculously spoiled we Americans are sometimes, but some days I sure appreciate it. I had a brutal headache and needed to run errands, and I was able to accomplish them all without getting out of my car. Went to the bank for money, paid a bill in a drop box, got some rolling papers at the drive-thru smoke shop, and got my dinner all without getting out of the driver's seat. Story 64. Served as a Peace Corps volunteer and have attended countless protests and marches. I've also knocked on doors to get out the vote in underserved communities. Story 65. Immigrate to somewhere else. I'm descended from people who got the fudge out of their countries. I feel it's in my genes to do the same. Story 66. Put a bottle rocket into one of those tiny holes on my hat, got scared, turned around, and tried to run away. Ran face first into a tree and busted my nose. My dumbass had the hat on still, didn't try to push the hat off or anything, just tried to run away like an idiot. The bottle rocket got off my hat. America. Story 67. Bought every flag novelty item right after September 11th. I still have some of it, including nail clippers and magnets. But I really did have ABD and bought anything and everything that had the American flag on it. Story 68. Every county abroad I've ever traveled to, I eat at McDonald's at least once to compare it with my local one. Usually for breakfast. Occasionally, I'll do a lunch. Story 69. Like, unless it affects an American personally, it doesn't matter. Story 70. Brought a bunch of guns to an outdoor shooting range and shot the shoot out of an old TV on the 4th of July while drinking Busch Light. Is this heaven? No, it's Iowa. Story 71. When I was visiting the States, Florida of course, I went shopping at Walmart, swam in a pool with alligators close by, and then went to a gun range all in the same day. I think that's about the most American thing I've done. Next day, I even drank adult beverage in a brown paper bag that made me feel naughty. Story 72. I have eaten McDonald's in multiple foreign countries in Asia and Europe. Spend all of the money and time to visit faraway lands to experience different cultures, and eating at the Golden Arches. I will say that the menus are different overseas, and it's fun to try some of the things you can't get in the US. but shame on me. Story 73. Drive from Florida to Alaska. Granted, it's the most North American thing, but that's what I got. Story 74. Went to a baseball game on the 4th of July, which also happened to be dollar hot dog night. I had 4 hot dogs. Story 75. Staying home and dealing with my COVID symptoms at the start when shoot was going crazy bad instead of going to the hospital. Felt like I got hit by a truck and I wanted to die every day for about 3 weeks, but I survived. That's American healthcare. The system is absolute dumpster fire dog shite. Story 76. Accidentally forgot to exchange any money when going to Canada and looked like a moron when I tried to pay with US currency. In America, we'd look at you like you had 3 heads if you tried to pay with foreign currency. In Canada, they just sigh and give us the horrible exchange rate that we deserve. Story 77. Ate something called a California-style chicken tikka masala burrito, and it was absolutely delicious. Story 78. Tomorrow, I'ma go with my buddy to the cemetery his great-grandfather is buried in and have a whiskey with him. Both our great-grandparents served in YE wine, mine in the ET and his in the PT. But mine are further away from home. Sometimes it's important to remember what's at stake. Story 79. One year I was in Boston on the 4th with some friends. We bought some Arizona iced teas and poured those bad boys into the harbor. Felt connected with the ancestors. Story 80. TLDR. I traded PTSD for medical care. I had a temporary crown on my tooth for over 3 years and it finally popped off one day. I had it for so long because I couldn't afford to finish the rest of the procedure. I also couldn't afford to have the temporary crown put back on, so I just went with the way it was for years. This caused an abscess to grow on the root of my tooth that I also could not afford to address. This is the origin story to my short-lived Air Force career where I could finally get medical care. Story 81. Fired off some fully automatic firearms while listening to the owner of the property and the owner of the guns talk shoot about Hillary Clinton. It was certainly a time. Story 82. Shot tannerite with a .30-06 out of the passenger seat of a Silverado while drinking a canned beverage. Story 83. I've attended college football games as a student, tailgating, the whole thing. Rafted down the river on cheap Walmart rafts, drove around a muddy farm in ATVs and a tricked-out hunting golf cart, shot some guns, and kids whose house it was got a visit from the neighbors because apparently the steel barrel they were shooting at was ricocheting bullets into their property XD. I've been to a Buc-ee's and was filled with pride I haven't felt in a while. Story 84. I take pride in how much gasoline I burn in my American-made trucks, big blocks, and gas guzzlers. Story 85. One 4th of July, I went to a friend's house to have a cookout, drink beer, and shoot guns in the back of his property. Story 86. Got laid off because my company's parent company made some bad investments. This a couple of months after my company released their most successful product in their 30-year history. Oh, and subsequently going into debt. Story 87. Usually am an over-generous tipper, but tipping is very American. In other countries, cultures, it's not practiced and even considered an insult. Story 88. I drove through Burger King to get a Whopper and then immediately drove through McDonald's to get fries. Story 89. Drove way over the speed limit down a dirt road with American flags in the back, standing tall and blaring that song from Team America World Police. Story 90. Went to Mount Rushmore on July 4th a couple years ago. On July 5th, got to hear a conspiracy theory from a tour guide at a nearby gold mine that the day before there were tons of cops protecting Mount Rushmore from anti-American terrorist Indians.